Okay, welcome everybody. Come on in, take your seat. It's Thursday, May 22nd. This is Finding Truth Everywhere. And this Thursday, we are looking at Francis Lucille, The Mystic and the Sage, What Truly Matters on the Spiritual Path. So this is a YouTube that we all watch together. And there was a lot in this YouTube. I think probably many of us had probably different aspects of it that we really enjoyed or got something out of that touched us. I know that was true for me, and I think that's true for Cindy. I'm going to go through just really quickly. There were about eight, seven or eight, no, nine questions actually, more than that, about 10 questions asked on this thing. And I just want to go through the questions and then take one or two of the questions really quickly and just show what it pointed to for me, and then open it up and let everybody else say what particular question really got to them. So the first question was, what is the direct path, and is one particular teacher necessary? So that was the first question. And then the second question was, is it bad to want to progress on the path? And then the third question was, sometimes I notice the discrete nature of experience and I feel that there's a gap. Is this gap consciousness without objects? The fourth question had to do with shifts in perceptions, which was kind of took off on the third question. Wanted to know what perception really is. And then the next question had to do with AI. And the person asked, can you tell if you're talking to AI or a real person? Is there any way to tell? And so Francis addresses that one. And the sixth question really picks up on the third. It's a woman who asked, you know what, sometimes I just stare off into space and my mind goes blank. And she wanted to know if that was beingness without thoughts. Is that the same thing as being without thoughts, or is that the gap? She wanted to know about that. And then there was another question about Krishnamurti and beauty. And the woman quoted Krishnamurti saying, "Beauty is where you are not. It's a tragedy when you don't see this. Beauty is, love is where you are not." She wanted to know, what does that mean? Love is where you are not. So Francis addressed that one. And then there was also a question about, what does it mean to experiment? You know, they talk a lot about, non-dual teachers talk a lot about experiment with your perception, experiment with your reality. And so what does it mean to experiment with the mind and have your experience with that? There was another question about the difference between the progressive path and the direct path and the role of commitment. And there was another question about the term happiness. What is happiness? What is peace? And Francis addresses that. So there were all kinds of places to jump in, and I don't know what really may have gotten to you or really moved you, but I think the thing that I want to focus on is the question about perception, because this is what moved me to really start experimenting myself. And Francis talks about the gap being present every time we shift our perception. So from thought A to thought B, there's a gap. And the gap is like the bridge between one perception and another. And Francis says most of us just think we go from one thought to another without any gap. We don't recognize anything. We think that we are the thinker of the thought, and that we are responsible for the generation of the thought from one to another. And Francis really beautifully showed how this is not true. He said, most people think the thoughts they think are continuous. And so he uses the example of coming to a point of knowing. And he said, in the moment of understanding, he says, a question arises. I'm going to go back. He says, we have a question, and then we have an understanding. We have a knowing. The answer comes. And he says, there is a moment where we have this question, and then we have a moment of understanding. Right? And in that moment of understanding, the question is no longer there because the understanding is there. But there is a gap between the understanding and the question. There's a gap when we have the question, but the formulated answer isn't there. But the reason we don't see that gap is because there aren't any objects in it. The question arises, there's a gap with no objects, and then the answer arises. He says, most of us think we just go from the question to the answer. But that gap, it is in the gap that the answer arises. The reason we don't remember the gap is because there aren't any objects, and memory is always of an object, whether that object is an emotion, a thought, a perception, a feeling. But when there is a quote unquote, what we would call a blank state, a state without objects, we don't have any memory of it. So the egoic mind thinks it doesn't exist. Right? Which I think is a really beautiful thing. Memory can process or record only phenomena. Right? It can't record anything but phenomena. That's what memory is. So the non-phenomenal isn't recorded because the egoic mind thinks that it's nothingness. But at the same time that there's nothingness, there's also consciousness because we're present. We are present without objects, present without memory, present in the now moment, right now, right? And this nothingness is always in the background. It is the background out of which everything else arises. I don't know if you remember, there was about a year or so ago when I read something in some scientific journal that talked about the attosecond, ATTO second. The attosecond is 1/1,000,000th of a trillionth of a second. 1/1,000,000th of 1/1,000,000th of a second. Now, we can measure that, quote unquote, measure that. But that shows you how quickly the egoic mind steps into that gap of nothingness and inserts itself. And that's why I was so intrigued by this question, because exploring the gap is really opening the window to your true nature. That space in which we experience nothingness, but consciousness is there. So he said, Francis called this a magical thing. He said, it's the nothingness which is always present and which is the background of all perceptions. It is beyond time and space. That's why the egoic mind can't recognize it, because it's not in time and it's not in space. It's pure consciousness in the absence of objects. And that's why he uses that moment of understanding as the example. So he says, when we're open to this possibility that consciousness is the bridge between two perceptions, something happens when we open to that, because that's another way of opening to your infinite nature. It's another way of, it's actually another way of experimenting about whether your nature is truly infinite or not. So that's what I wanted to go through. I want to just read some of the comments here. Cindy says, just inspired to share there's an inner disturbance arising with this pointing, felt it during the podcast. The idea of not remembering the gap. Does it mean I can never know myself? Oh, that's a great question. And then Kendall says, maybe that's because it's not in the mind, perhaps. So there's a lot in there. We could spend a whole hour just on this, but let's open it up. And Barbie, why don't you lead us off?
Okay,
Good morning.
good
Good
morning.
morning.
I kind of understood the whole thing, but I got caught up in the blank state. And I know that I know something about memory and objects, and you can't remember unless there's an object involved, whatever. I'm not saying it right, but I know what I'm talking. I think I know what I'm talking about. But when it comes to the blank state, because I know I've had some, but I can remember being in the blank state and nothing's there. I know there's nothing there. It was like a big void, but I remember being there. But I still don't know what a blank state is.
I think that's a really good point. And I think what Lucille is trying to point to isn't so much to remember the blank state as to understand that there is a state of consciousness without objects, and to try to explore that.
Okay, thanks. Because it's only in deep meditation, it's like I'm there. It's empty and I'm there. And I remember sometimes when I go down there, but I don't remember what goes on there. Is that what he's talking about?
I think that that's touching on it. I feel as though we can just touch on this. But remember, A Course tells us that God takes the final step. And
Yeah.
I think this is my understanding, and I could be wrong about this, and I'd love to have Mel join in, because she's uh, as much into the non-dual teachings as any of us. But so I think, yes, the blank state, there's no perception, no time, no memory. Now, Francis uses another example in this teaching, Barbie, I will, I'm trying to decide whether to, remember when he talks about the guru who is being waited on
Yeah.
by his disciple, and he says,
The glass of water.
yeah, I'm thirsty. And then he goes into samadhi, and the disciple sits there for 50 years with the glass of water. And then the guru comes out and says, I'm thirsty. He hasn't really stayed in the blank state. He may have gone there, but he comes back, right? Is not really there, because he still comes out and he goes right back into
Where he ended.
duality. into the body, right?
Okay.
So I think we can touch it and we can experiment with it, but it's not a place we can stay, right? We can't stay there. But it's a wonderful pointer to play with this because it does give us some experience beyond the mind. It gives us a knowing. It's not really even an experience. You can't call it an experience. It's non-local, it's not personal, it's timeless, it's infinite. There's nothing there, right?
It's there, but my body isn't,
Yeah.
whatever. Okay, thank you. That helped a
Thank
lot.
you. Thank you. Cindy.
The record, I'm also waiting for Mel to raise her hand. Um,
No
and
pressure.
I'm coming mostly just to report direct experience. I do remember that Francis was talking about how, the small, I don't know that his words, my words are, the individual mind doesn't remember anything that's not an object. But isn't this so interesting? I can remember exactly where I was when I was listening to this part of the podcast. Like I was walking up a path and I was a street I was never on. Like that's all objective memory, right? Which is it's just an interesting noticing. He was saying that and there was a disturbance. And then he said, and there's something beyond that, right? He said, we don't we don't need that part of the mind to be. And I can remember feeling, aha, yes, of course. But I recognized that that just comforted that mind, gave it a reason to rest. Um, and then I forgot about it until I'm in this converse, like listening to you share, and this system's getting all worked up again. It's defending memory. It's defending this sense of wanting to know what truth is from its limited perception. And I can tell you, I understand that that's not true, but there seems to be value in saying that its alarm bells have gone off. And I'm holding it in something that's outside of that. So all I'm really doing is reporting direct experience. There's something here that insists that it should know what it is and got upset or disturbed as you were sharing that what I am is in the gap. And if there's no object, there's no memory, right? That it doesn't fit with whatever this aspect of self is that wants to understand. So there's no answer to it. I'm just outing it, but I would love to hear anyone share around it.
I will share one thing. Jenny Beal talked about this, and I think many of us who are deep meditators have probably had the experience, but of going so deeply into the emptiness that fear, it's not even fear, it's terror arises. And that terror is the ego recognizing that it's about to dissipate into nothingness. And the ego is so afraid of not being in charge. As you said, really, really afraid. So just to say, Francis describes this state of perception, a state without perception. And he said, that's the moment, that's the background of all eternity. Right? And he says the experience of pure consciousness is in fact inaccessible to the mind. No, that's what Kendall was saying. It can't be represented in terms of phenomenal perceptions. right? It cannot. So no words can really describe it, right? It's all still a projection of the mind. And that's the tricky thing, because sometimes in meditation, we will try to go into this experience of nothingness, but it's really the ego still protecting itself by projecting the idea of nothingness into its own awareness, right? And he said, yogis use this a lot. It's an attempt to reach the blank state without ever really losing yourself. And that's when he told the story about the guru that went into samadhi. That's when he told that story, right? So and he says the point is the desire that he had to reach samadhi was a need. That was a need and a desire, and that had not been erased by the blank state. It was just a duration of time, right? It was just his need for the drink of water was just put in between two brackets of time. And then he said, on the direct path, we get this information so we don't waste time trying to make the effort to reach a state we already are. That's what Sandra was going to say. Yeah, and that's exactly right. We don't worry about reaching this state because we already are it, right? So frig it, right? Whatever is here is here. It's already in consciousness. It's appearing in consciousness. So we don't have to wait. He said that's what the direct path is. Right? Anyway, Sandra, come to the head of the table.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be back. And yeah, I just wanted so much to say, but I'll try to come from a place, all the different questions. What I got out of this, all these different questions, which seemed to address something different, he always came back to the same answers in different words. I mean, he was very considerate of the questions. And attempted to answer them on the plane that where the asker was. And yet he kept coming back. And the one thing he said in relation to one of the questions you're talking about experiments and the definition and meditation and yoga, he says it's very simple. It's a simple answer to all of this. The problem is to be open to the truth that consciousness is universal. The only obstacle is we don't believe it. Very simple. And he even said at some point about trying to find the gap or find the blank space or meditate like the yogi did for decades. He used the word valueless. It's valueless. And it's not in those states that you know you're
My water bill, just as tea.
Hi, Barbie, you're so cute. I love you in that hat. That's not where we find our true self in these states. They're just like, I don't know. I can't answer that. So what I wanted to comment on in this beautiful Finding Truth Everywhere is what he said that just always lights me up. I wrote it down. He was talking about the king in the garden with his beautiful queen, and they had made love, and the fragrance was beautiful, and the flowers were there, and then he heard a chanting in the distance, and that did it. Whatever it is, that did it. And he says, and here's what Francis said, all of that was not important. We tend to want to get to a state where we see and feel and experience things, and that isn't what's important. It happens when you hear the truth and something in you says yes.
Yep.
That's it. That's an exact quote from Francis Lucille. It happens when you hear the truth and something in you says yes, that's it. And something lights up inside and resonates, almost like the guys are saying, like you get to a frequency level where you heard that truth and there it is, and you feel it and you don't even know what it is really. It's amazing. And he kind of gave that answer through everything. The blank state, he says it's just a state, it's not a solution. And I know that after, I mean, that, my very first glimpse, and I hate calling it a glimpse because it sounds too minor, but was when I knew something was true that I did not know before. When I realized, when I read something and I went, wow, that's true. And I knew that I was not different than any other person on the earth, and that I had the same essence as someone like Jesus or Buddha, and that was me and I was no different. That was it. That's it. That's simple. Believing the truth. Oh, and I really love, I mean, he's so funny. He says we keep going for things, like we keep doing things to try to temporarily forget. He said we can either temporarily forget or we can take care of the problem for good. We've got two choices there. And he did say it was the choice. Two ways to not be a separate person. We can temporarily forget, or we can take care of the problem for good. And he says we keep trying to temporarily forget by looking for happiness and beauty and love. And that is not based on the phenomena or the objects. It's just a prescription drug to sleep. And we keep doing that. We keep chasing that. He says we're trying to give ignorance a poison pill. And then he said something else, which I think startled everyone in the audience. Coming here is a poison pill. Because we're searching for it outside of ourselves. It's all right here in us, every day, all the time. We are it. It's that simple.
I think I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to just say that the gap is an insight. It's an insight into the understanding that everything that I perceive is arising in my awareness. That's all that is. That's all it is.
It's like
It doesn't mean you live in the gap. It
no,
means that you see.
through it. You can mention, he said that at the very end because somebody was saying, well, what is the role of commitment and doing the yoga and doing the meditation and all of that? And he said something really interesting. He said, it's like a kind of progression, like fine wine. Like after you have this realization, then you deepen your understanding. And I think that's what you're speaking to, Amy.
Exactly.
Deepen your understanding, you become more established in that understanding. And communication happens more easily with maturity, being able to speak of these things. And it's more explosive and more free.
Yep.
So when I knew this, and then I went back and tried to go and learn how to meditate, because I thought, oh, that's why they're meditating. And I spent time with a group here in my community, and I realized something startling. They were doing meditation to try to find something that I had already found. And I didn't need to go there anymore.
Yeah.
Because it was too frustrating. So anyway, I've spoken a lot now. I get very excited and enthusiastic and I experience such a joy with these teachings that it always wants to be said.
Yep.
It's almost like I don't want to say it, but it wants to be said. And there it goes. So thank you for listening to all of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Patricia, what have you got for us this morning or this afternoon?
Good morning. Yeah, it's still morning here.
Yeah.
This morning I was working and all of a sudden I just stopped and I went, took a breath and just stayed in the moment. And that's all that was needed. And then something from deep inside I could give out. I could give to these people I was working with. That simple. When I remembered. It was a bit of magic. And when I keep reminding myself, because it's a continual practice, oh, right, come back to the moment. Oh, right, come back to the moment. They're all saying the same thing. Come back to the moment and breathe into it and allow. Because that's where you live. There's nothing there until there's something there that needs to be given. Anyway, that's all I have to say. And it's wonderful to be here, and it's wonderful to see you all, and I love you.
Thank you. Received. In some ways, we could describe the gap, not to get too caught up in this, but I realize that I am doing this. It's not nothingness, it's pure potential. Everything is there, right? Everything is there and nothing's there, which is really impossible for the mind to understand. So,
But when nothing is there, like the example I gave just a little while ago, something came.
yes,
But it was certainly bigger than me.
yes. Yeah.
And I also do it with us. You know, it's just being present and listening and learning from all of you. You're my wonderful teachers.
Mhm. All right, Mel.
Hi, everyone. Oh, it's so good to absorb all your wonderful thoughts and energy. And it's hard to add anything, but I guess when the gap is always here. So and as now is always here. And so we get so worked up with trying to find something that's always here. I know you all kind of made that point. And I think it was reassuring that, it's off, even every night we go to sleep, right? Or often. So there's a wonderful gap. And we feel so refreshed if we get into that, deep sleep and nothing that's really, we don't need the mind to remember that. And I find like it's kind of nice, the idea that memory, because I forget, I can't remember a lot. So anyway, it's kind of nice to know that memory isn't, um, that's happening all the time. And one of the things is when he said like 1 minute of meditation can equal a lifetime of practice. I don't know, or one moment. So which made me think of the holy instant immediately, that holy instant, which is that potentiality, which is always available. And you can be in a deep dive and just the next moment it can be totally new. So it was pretty cool. And you're letting me think about contemplate all this. So thank you.
I love that. Thank you. And he was answering the question. This questioner said the term happiness doesn't really fit for me. He said, for me, it's really subtle, being at peace more than happiness. So he said, are there different forms of this? And that's when Francis said, we all manifest happiness differently, but there are certain commonalities. He said it's like a progression, like fine wine that communicates itself more and more easily with maturity, right? And I think that maturity comes from the wisdom born of experience, like seeing the commonalities in experience that are all happiness, no matter what name we give to them. And so, and I loved it when he said, I wouldn't trust a sage that doesn't have a sense of humor, right? That was great. Rana, what you got for us? I know you have a sense of humor.
Thanks. Grateful to be here for sure. Great discussion. Overall, I enjoyed it very much. In terms of the discussion he was having on the gaps, he used the word binary. You know, he said binary assumes there are gaps everywhere. And so sitting with that, what came was that binary was sort of pointing towards duality, you know, and that between the binary is the gap of consciousness. Perhaps this shows that duality is contained in consciousness, kind of what Mel was just pointing to. And this idea the background is always here, right? But there's this perception that because I'm living, I seem to be living from event to event, right? Objects of experience to objects of experience. And so it occurred to me, could I live from awareness to awareness, from the consciousness gap to the consciousness gap? Like it's pointing towards that's what's more important. And that's the rest in between. That's the place where I get the inspiration for wherever is coming next. You know, so it seemingly the perception is gap to gap, but in the background of all of it, all the gaps, all the objects, everything is contained in consciousness. And I appreciated his pointing, or is consciousness, not in it, but the container, you know? Here I
Yeah,
go. The words aren't working right now, but I think I'm making sense of the point.
I think that's a good interpretation. I don't think he was as clear as he could have been at that point. What he said is that we often have a stop in the train of thinking. The movie is never really continuous. There
Right.
may be many more gaps than you can remember. And then he talked about the neurons that fire do so after a buildup of energy. So they get a buildup and then they fire, right? And he said it seems like at its very foundation, the whole nervous system is binary. It's either firing or it's at rest,
It's on or off.
firing or at rest. So the network transmission, which is the body and the brain, is not continuous. So he said, whatever the outcome, whatever the port out of the system is, it has to be a yes or a no. And there are gaps in there, which is, I think, what you just said. The system is binary, it's firing on or off, on or off, on or off. But behind that is a continuous flow.
Mm-hmm.
And we get caught up in the on or off, on or off, on or off, and we miss that continuous flow.
Mm-hmm. And there seems to be a choice point of willingness or resistance with that yes or no, you know, and then if it's willingness, it's like the superconductor, it's just allowed to just flow through. You know, the resistance with the no is like bang, 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 you know, suffering, suffering, suffering.
Yeah.
And that's all happening with mind, you know, and I really appreciated his questions in the beginning. Am I certain I am a separate consciousness or not? Am I limited or not? And he suggested, and it has been my experience, if sitting with those questions brings wisdom. And it's not necessarily words, it's the knowing that we're talking about that is within that gap. So, and he talked about the be open to the possibility that consciousness is universal because you're taking the safe side. It's like going to the casino and getting the good bet. You can't go wrong with that. Believe truth is true, and it is bonus. And if it's not, whatever, you're not going to suffer either way. So, and then the final pointing, I heard it so clear, was let go of the feeling you are separate from God. Just let go of that.
That reminds me, Rupert Spira had these 3 words that impersonal, infinite, and what was it? Impersonal, infinite, and intimate. Intimate. So intimate, impersonal, and infinite. And I could get the intimate because it's so close that we overlook it. The infinite I got, but the impersonal, I was like, I had Cindy's resistance to that, impersonal. And that's because the ego thrives on being special.
Yeah. It
But
says,
when
what about me? If it's impersonal, what about my slice of God?
Exactly. 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 Oh,
Thank you, my dear.
thank you. Great pulling out there. Cindy.
Confess that I'm surprised, that I'm inspired to move the conversation to this idea of whether or not I can tell whether or not someone I am speaking to in the other room is a human or AI. And I'm curious what people think. I
Oh,
am I'm sitting or feel I'm sitting um, with Federico and his passionate, there is no way a machine can ever be conscious, right? So I buy that, the whole needing an infinite potential to arise to become conscious, and a machine is always on off. The question that was raised here wasn't whether or not AI could ever be conscious. It was whether or not I could ever tell if I am interacting with something that's conscious. And I don't know if it matters. But I am fascinated now by this kind of question in general. So um, I would love to get others, you know, if you just ignored that part, if you have feelings about that part, what, you know, this aspect of whether or not because he said 200 years from now, you're not going to be able to tell that it's getting more refined all the time. And like everywhere I look, people are talking about chatting with AI and the importance of it and whatever. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of opinions. I'm wondering for my own self if I know I am. How does that relate to anything I experience, like a voice in the other room? So that's a question.
I think Patricia's got something she wants to say.
Thank you. It's almost like what he was talking about when there were questions in the New York Times, and he thought about it, and then he responded to it, but he intuitively had a feeling toward it. And he was correct that they were all AI. The conversations were all AI. And I wonder about that. I know that James Twyman often has an AI that he responds to, and I can tell it's AI, and he can tell it's AI. But the wisdom, because it's from wisdom. It's from knowledge. It's intellectual knowledge. And I think that's one of the things that we have to remember. Isn't it wonderful that we have this intellectual knowledge that's around, but it's also a gut feeling. I don't know. That's all I wanted to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Indigo.
Hi, everyone. So great to be here with all of you. It's so interesting. I just always go back to that everything that is happening is here for me. And just to bring it in, I don't need to understand it. I can just let it just be, and that it's whatever's happening is here for me, and just to love it. And I can hate it or whatever, but I can still just love it because it's here for me. Even when I don't understand it, which I don't many times, that it's here for me. And ask God to show me what to do.
So Indigo,
Uh-huh.
are you answering in a way or addressing or responding to Cindy's bringing up AI? So would you say that AI is here for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything to me, everything is here for us. Even when I don't like it.
Yep.
I can just I can step back. I don't need to know why.
So you would maybe say AI arises in the minds of its quote unquote inventors, because the inventors are the mind of God. It's all one. It's all arising within the one. And there's no separation from AI or consciousness. It doesn't mean AI is consciousness, but it's all arising from that place.
And it's here for me. Whatever is here, it's here for me. And we don't need to understand it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I love being here.
We love your being here. We love it when you're here. Bubbles, did you have a question? Or a comment or a response, or let me see if you put it in the chat.
I actually just, in response to Cindy's very interesting question, I was going to say something similar to what you just said, Amy. But then I wanted to add that, add to what Cindy said, that I don't think it really matters, because it's, it's kind of like going to a David Copperfield show, and it's, and seeing, is this real or is this not? And it's not, but it feels real. But in general, everything is an illusion, except for love and our oneness. So I echo what you said, Cindy. I don't think it matters, but it's fun to play with. It's fun to talk about and question.
Yeah, thank you. I love that Francis said it never gets frustrated with me. It never gets impolite. It's always, it's like, well, let's unpack that together, right? I really like that. And he says we're extremely close to the moment of the Turing test where we won't be able to tell. I don't know. But he thinks physically we're a long way off from creating a phenomenal experience using AI that would convince us that it's a phenomenal human, quote unquote. But that, that does get to the point in some ways. And Kendall she says that it may be a course correction. And I would love Kendall to unpack that. I know Sandra has something she wants to say, but what kind of a course correction would it be? And what comes to mind in that is, are we human? What is human? No. So Sandra, and then maybe Kendall will expand on her comment.
I don't mind waiting for Kendall to expand, because I was going to change the subject.
Oh, okay.
So go ahead, Kendall.
Maybe she's not.
So
Of
here it
course,
comes. There
what
it is.
comes to mind, it's redirecting us back to the truth.
Well, that's kind of where I was. What's so beautiful about listening to Francis Lucille is his absolute certainty. His certainty, his conviction, and then the words that arise from that certainty keep pointing back to the same thing. And one thing I wrote that he said, and I wrote it in all caps, that means I wanted to remember it. He said, we are already consciousness. We're not searching for consciousness. And sometimes the questioners seem to be searching for it. You know, no matter what the question was, they were searching for something they thought they didn't have. So they wanted the right practice, or they wanted the right understanding. And he said, we're already consciousness. And he says, if you're trying through your own effort to reach consciousness, what have you achieved? And then he talked about the guru who said, I'm thirsty, you know. What did he achieve in all those years? So what I kept coming back to was, he kept, in my mind, you know, and I never know if I'm just picking out the things that reinforce what I believe. Sometimes I do that, but he kept coming back to truth. All you need is you wanted this thirst for truth, this hunger for truth, wanting to know the truth. And that intention will bring it to you. And sometimes he says it's just instantaneous. When he was talking about the gap, it's instantaneous. You don't know where it comes from. You described some kind of second that seemed very short, Amy. It's almost
Add a second.
there isn't even a second. It's instantaneous.
Yeah, it is.
And you know it, and you know it's true, and you can just rest in that. And then he talked about the guy who, I guess it was a parable, who wanted to go from Florida to the French Riviera. What a beautiful little story. You know, he would go here, he would go there, he would get course corrections. And yet all the while he didn't need to go anywhere. He didn't need to go anywhere to experience the beauty. You know, that the beauty is where you are not. That's only if you believe you're a separate person. But if you don't believe you're a separate person anymore, then you know you are beauty. And you can bring beauty to anything. It doesn't have to be the walk and the path and the mountains. You can bring beauty to the ghetto. You can bring beauty to everything. And that's what Indigo keeps telling us. Everything is for us. We
You
bring
know,
truth to everything.
what you're reminding me of, Sandra, is I'm watching Francis as he gets older, and his teaching is becoming more simple. It's just end the belief in separation. And it's such a synchronicity. It's just it's not even synchronous. It's the same thing A Course in Miracles teaches.
It's what all truth teaches, all of it. It's so recognizable. And that word enlightenment always threw me off to me, but it does bring this feeling of a glow to me. I wonder if other people experience that, this feeling of a warm glow.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's true.
Yeah.
And I don't have to really figure it out or understand it anymore, which is I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to, like, chop it into little pieces, go down this little path, figure that one out. Now go down this little path and figure that one. I'm already in Florida. I'm staying there. I don't need to go anywhere with it. I'm not really in Florida, I'm in Delaware, but you get what I'm saying.
I do, and I think that your earlier comment about maturation and
Yes.
wisdom and maturation, if we have this simple truth that there's no separation, then the maturation and the wisdom, like the fine wine, comes from experiencing over and over and over and over again. And that's the experiment. Am I separate? Am I separate? Am I separate? What happens when I believe I'm separate? Am I happier? No. When I accept that there's no separation and I behave in the world and I treat others and the world as if there's no separation, am I happier? Yes. There's an experiment right there, right there.
I just had a wonderful experience. I went away to a beautiful island with my 2 daughters for 5 days. And I had no different feeling of being than I feel right now with you.
Yeah.
It's the same all the time. It doesn't matter where I am. Even everybody kept trying to question me about how much it must matter that where I was. And I try to go along with it because that's what's expected, right? Oh, yes, it was beautiful. But it's no more beautiful than looking at each of your faces.
Yeah.
Which is so beautiful.
Yeah.
So I have to let Chuck talk now. My time. I've had enough time.
It's all yours, Chuck.
Thank you. I just I couldn't reach it. I wasn't going to say anything, but I was so overwhelmed by all this. But the one thing that got resonated with this that I decided to open my mouth was that when I first I had this experience with when I read the book. What got me to the Course in Miracles. I mean, I had the book, but I hadn't opened it or anything. Was the book by Gary Renard, The Disappearance of the Universe. And I didn't even know what it was when I ordered. I thought it had something to do with quantum physics or something. And when I got in I think it's in the second paragraph or something, when I read the book, it said there is no world. And that was like a gut punch to me. I mean, I was just literally gut punched, and I didn't know. But at the same time, what you guys have been, what I had something in me that I wasn't even aware of or know, but I knew it was true. And that's what got me to go ahead and pull the book of Course Miracles off my bookcase and look at it. It's not something I didn't recognize enough. So that's what I'm identifying with so clearly that you're saying in my own experience. And the other thing doesn't have anything to do with what you're saying, but what Sandra just did is I've been wanting to ask this for a long time. She just released all those hearts in a group. I've seen the heart on the reactions thing, but I've never been able to figure out how you guys release it in groups.
It's under react, and you have you may not have this, but there are 2 levels. One is send with effect and one is reactions. And so then you send it with effect.
Okay.
So you send it with effect.
Thank you. I've been wanting to ask that for weeks now.
Great question. There you go.
Love you all. Thanks for
Love
having
you all
me.
too. And I love that, Chuck, because I had the same response, the disappearance of the universe. Like, what the freak does that mean? Doesn't the universe go on and on? Isn't it infinite? I had the same thing. That was such an eye-opener. Oh, all right. Well, we have spent another wonderful hour together. Very,
Thank you.
very good. Who's doing next week?
Well, I'm going to communicate. I'm going to communicate. First, I want to say thank you, Amy. This was extraordinary.
Oh, thank you.
I have set up the next 3 podcasts. And this group will enjoy them. Next week comes from A recommendation from Richard. It's a Christian Sundberg podcast that Richard had recommended, and so I set it up right away as soon as he did it. The week after that, so if there's a Course in Miracles person here who wants to do this, otherwise I will. There is a 2-hour Keith Kavanaugh podcast that says the name of the podcast is A Course in Miracles Non-Dual, and it's Keith Kavanaugh. And I've seen it for a while, but I didn't like. We're doing 2-hour podcasts now, so I recorded it. And then the third one I set up is another Andre, some monk who's not a monk anymore. And I looked at it and something inside of me lit up. So I didn't want to do Andre 2 weeks in a row. So those are the next 3 podcasts. If anybody wants to facilitate any of those, or they have something else, let me know. But that's the way it looks right now.
God, I wish Richard was here because he could facilitate the Keith Kavanaugh one.
Yeah, he can't commit to Thursdays at noon.
Okay. All
All
right.
right, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.